Stop everything. Stop exactly what you are doing right now, put your coffee aside, silence your phone, and pay absolute attention to every single word that is about to follow. This is Capital Archives, and what we are about to expose today is not just another fleeting market anomaly, a technical glitch on a trading terminal, or a speculative rumor. We are looking at the blueprint of the greatest financial heist and wealth transfer of the modern era, a silent operation executed with surgical precision by the East, while the Western financial establishment remains paralyzed by its own hubris. The narrative you have been fed by mainstream financial media is that silver is just an underperforming asset, trapped in the $30 range, a relic of the past struggling to find its place in a digitized economy. But if you look away from the flashing red and green numbers on your local brokerage screen and turn your eyes toward the Orient, a terrifying reality emerges. As of this very moment, the sharpest financial minds, the largest state-run industrial conglomerates, and the central banking authorities in China are willingly, aggressively, and continuously paying a premium of $10 to $12 above the global spot price for every single ounce of physical silver they can get their hands on. They are paying a massive premium for the exact same metal that Western algorithms are suppressing. The question that should be keeping every investor, every fund manager, and every citizen awake at night is not whether this is happening, but why. Why would the second largest economy on the planet pay $40 or $45 an ounce in Shanghai for a commodity that is supposedly worth only $30 in New York or London? The answer is as brutal as it is simple. Because they know your silver does not actually exist, and they are using the West's manipulated paper prices to drain the physical world dry. To understand the sheer magnitude of this operation, you must first understand the fatal flaw in the architecture of Western financial markets. For decades, the price of precious metals has been discovered and dictated not by the exchange of physical atoms of gold and silver, but by the trading of synthetic derivative contracts on exchanges like the COMEX in New York and the LBMA in London. In these markets, institutions trade promises. They trade pieces of paper and digital entries that represent silver, operating on a fractional reserve basis where hundreds of paper claims can exist for every single actual ounce of metal sitting in a vault. As long as the participants in this casino are content to settle their bets in fiat currency, rolling their contracts over from month to month and taking their profits in dollars, the illusion holds. The paper price remains suppressed because the supply of paper silver is infinite. Wall Street can conjure millions of ounces of synthetic silver into existence with a single keystroke. But China, having observed this systemic vulnerability, decided to stop playing the paper game. They established the Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Shanghai Futures Exchange with a fundamentally different philosophy. These are physical delivery markets. When a contract is settled in Shanghai, the buyer expects the physical metal to be loaded onto a secure transport and driven out of the vault. By allowing the price of physical silver to float higher in Shanghai, creating a persistent $10 premium over the West, Beijing has engineered the ultimate arbitrage trap. They have created a giant financial vacuum cleaner. Bullion banks and opportunistic traders look at the screen, see cheap silver in London, buy it, fly it across the world, and sell it in Shanghai for an instant, massive, risk-free profit. China is effectively subsidizing the drainage of Western vaults, paying a premium to ensure that the physical metal flows irreversibly from west to east. The data confirming this massive wealth transfer is not hidden. It is hiding in plain sight for anyone willing to read the official reports rather than the mainstream headlines. Let us look at the official withdrawal numbers from the Shanghai Gold Exchange for the first 60 days of this year. When we say withdrawal, we do not mean silver that has simply changed ownership while remaining inside the exchange's custody. We mean physical metal that has been permanently removed from the financial infrastructure, destined for industrial consumption or private hoarding. In 2018, the January and February combined withdrawals stood at 175 tons. In 2019, it was 122 tons. Through the pandemic and post-pandemic years, it fluctuated, peaking briefly at 251 tons in 2021 before settling back down. But in the first 60 days of 2026, the withdrawal figure absolutely shattered historical precedents, reaching a staggering 436.8 tons. This is a skyscraper of demand suddenly appearing in a quiet neighborhood. It represents an increase of more than 70% over the previous year and nearly triple the volume of 2025. In just 2 months, almost 437 tons of physical silver evaporated from the Chinese exchange system. To put that into perspective, global mining produces roughly 820 million ounces of silver annually, which equates to about 68 million ounces, or roughly 2,100 tons per month. This means that a massive percentage of the entire planet's newly mined silver is being swallowed whole by a single exchange in a single country, leaving virtually nothing to replenish the rapidly depleting stockpiles in the West. But the withdrawal data is only the symptom. The disease is a profound structural panic that has begun to grip the Chinese populace and its industrial base. To comprehend the velocity of this panic, we must look at the recent events unfolding in the retail banking sector in Beijing. In early March, reports began to surface from the Kaohsiung district that the physical gold market had completely dislocated from reality. Retail prices for branded gold in jewelry stores skyrocketed past 1,600 yuan per gram. However, the true shockwave hit the digital infrastructure of the nation's financial behemoths. The Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, which is the largest bank in the world by total assets, and the Agricultural Bank of China, the fourth largest, abruptly updated their mobile applications to show that investment-grade gold bars were completely sold out. Institutions that serve over 1 billion customers and manage trillions of dollars in assets simply ran out of physical gold. When the Tier 1 monetary asset vanishes from the shelves, human psychology dictates an immediate and violent pivot to the next available substitute. The Chinese citizens, desperate to protect their purchasing power from a weakening yuan and a collapsing domestic real estate market, turn their insatiable appetite towards silver. This is a historical pattern that repeats with flawless consistency. Gold is the metal of kings. It is drained first by central banks and ultra-high net worth individuals. When it becomes inaccessible or prohibitively expensive, the middle class and the retail investors stampede into the poor man's gold. We saw this dynamic play out in 2011. We saw it during the severe supply chain breakdowns of 2020, and we are witnessing it right now on a scale never before seen in human history. This retail stampede, however, is merely a drop in the ocean compared to the ravenous existential demand coming from the Chinese industrial complex. Silver is not just a shiny rock used to mint coins. It is the most electrically conductive, thermally conductive, and highly reflective metal on the periodic table of elements. It is the indispensable DNA of the modern technological age. China currently dominates the global manufacturing of solar panels, producing over 80% of the world's supply. The narrative pushed by Western analysts to calm the markets is that solar manufacturers will simply engineer silver out of the panels, replacing it with cheaper copper through a process called thrifting. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of metallurgical science. While some companies are experimenting with copper, the reality is that copper oxidizes and suffers from severe thermal diffusion when placed directly on silicon, drastically reducing the efficiency and the lifespan of the solar cell. The global solar industry has rapidly transitioned to top-econ and heterojunction cell architectures, which are vastly more efficient than older technologies, but require significantly more silver paste to function. Even with aggressive thrifting attempts, the sheer volume of solar deployment means the photovoltaic sector alone will consume hundreds of millions of ounces of silver this year. When a Chinese state-backed solar conglomerate realizes that the global above-ground stockpiles of silver are rapidly approaching zero, they do not care about the COMEX paper price. They will gladly pay a $10 premium, a $20 premium, or whatever it takes to secure the physical metal. Because without silver, their multi-billion-dollar factories shut down, their geopolitical dominance in green energy evaporates, and their workforce faces catastrophic unemployment. The industrial necessity for silver extends far beyond the solar sector, reaching into the very heart of the artificial intelligence revolution and the electrification of global transportation. We are currently in the midst of an AI arms race, requiring the construction of hyperscale data centers across the globe. These data centers are filled with advanced microprocessors and server racks that generate immense amounts of heat and require flawless electrical conductivity to process complex algorithms without latency. Silver is used extensively in high-end computing applications, specialized solders, and thermal management systems precisely because it is the only element capable of handling these extreme physical demands without failure. Simultaneously, the global push to replace internal combustion engines with electric vehicles is placing an unprecedented strain on the silver supply. A traditional gasoline-powered vehicle uses roughly half an ounce of silver in its electrical contacts and switches. A modern battery electric vehicle, packed with autonomous driving sensors, complex battery management systems, and miles of sophisticated wiring, requires 2 to 3 times that amount. China is the undisputed global leader in EV manufacturing and exportation. They are building millions of these vehicles, effectively creating rolling silver vaults that permanently lock the metal out of the financial system. When you combine the insatiable demand of the solar industry, the explosive growth of AI infrastructure, and the mandatory electrification of transport, you realize that China is not paying a $10 premium to speculate on a price increase. They are paying a premium to guarantee their national security and their industrial survival in the 21st century. While this monumental accumulation of physical metal occurs in the East, we must turn our attention back to the West to witness the slow, agonizing death of the COMEX registered inventories. The registered category on the COMEX represents the physical silver that is fully audited, available, and ready to be delivered to satisfy a futures contract. For the past 6 months, this stockpile has been bleeding out at a terrifying consistent rate of roughly 20 million ounces per month. We have watched the registered inventory plummet from a comfortable 200 million ounces down to a deeply alarming 88 million ounces. This is not a momentary dip caused by a temporary supply chain bottleneck. This is a structural hemorrhage. If we project this current rate of depletion forward, acknowledging that industrial demand is accelerating rather than slowing down, the COMEX registered vaults could reach absolute zero in approximately 100 trading days. We are staring down the barrel of a complete inventory collapse by September of 2026. When a commodity exchange built on fractional reserve paper contracts runs out of the underlying physical asset, the consequences are cataclysmic. The exchange is forced to declare force majeure, essentially telling the holders of long contracts that they will not receive the metal they purchase, but will instead be settled in cash at whatever the manipulated paper price happens to be. But cash cannot conduct electricity. Cash cannot capture solar energy. When the industrial users who rely on the COMEX for physical delivery are told that the vaults are empty, panic will ensue. They will bypass the paper markets entirely and enter the physical market, bidding the price of silver up to multiples of its current value in a matter of days. The $10 premium we see in Shanghai today is merely the foreshock of this impending earthquake. To make matters worse for the West, the global mining industry is completely incapable of coming to the rescue. The mainstream assumption is that if the price of silver rises, miners will simply turn on the taps and flood the market with new supply, restoring the balance. This assumption demonstrates a fatal ignorance of geological reality. Silver is a geological anomaly. Approximately 70% of all the silver mined globally is not extracted from primary silver mines. It is a byproduct of mining for industrial base metals like zinc, lead, and copper. You cannot simply instruct a zinc miner to double their silver output. In order to get more silver, they would have to double their zinc production, which would crash the global price of zinc and bankrupt their operation. Therefore, the supply of newly mined silver is fiercely inelastic. It does not respond swiftly or significantly to an increase in the price of silver itself. Furthermore, after decades of underinvestment, environmental restrictions, and the depletion of high-grade ores in traditional strongholds like Mexico and Peru, the global mining output has flatlined. We are extracting roughly 8 ounces of silver from the Earth's crust for every 1 ounce of gold. This 8-to-1 geological ratio stands in stark, ridiculous contrast to the financial markets pricing ratio, which values gold at roughly 80 times the price of silver. This discrepancy is one of the most egregious mispricings in the history of capital markets. China knows that this 80-to-1 financial ratio is a temporary hallucination created by Western derivative markets. They understand the geology. They know that when the paper illusion shatters, the price of silver must violently recalibrate to reflect its true scarcity in the Earth's crust. By paying a premium today, they are securing a vital asset at a massive discount to its inevitable future value. We cannot analyze this great silver migration without acknowledging the broader geopolitical chessboard and the deliberate strategy of the BRICS nations to dismantle the hegemony of the United States dollar. For the last 80 years, the global economy has operated under the unipolar dominance of the dollar, a system where the United States can export its inflation to the rest of the world and weaponize its currency against any nation that steps out of line. The watershed moment occurred in 2022 when Western powers froze hundreds of billions of dollars in sovereign Russian reserves. This action sent a chilling, unmistakable message to the capitals of the global south from Beijing to New Delhi to Riyadh. Your wealth is only yours as long as you keep it in physical assets within your own borders. If you hold it in Western digital fiat, it can be confiscated with a single keystroke. In response, the BRICS nations embarked on the most aggressive campaign of physical asset accumulation in modern history. They began hoarding gold, rapidly diversifying their central bank reserves away from U.S. treasuries. But as the gold price surged and supply tightened, the strategy expanded to encompass all critical tangible commodities, with silver becoming the prime target due to its dual role as a monetary metal and an irreplaceable industrial component. The Shanghai premium is not just an economic phenomenon, it is a weapon of financial warfare. By offering a higher price for physical silver, China is effectively draining the strategic reserves of the Western world, moving the tangible wealth of the planet from the vaults of London and New York into the secure depositories of the East. They are preparing for a new multipolar monetary order, one backed not by the empty promises of indebted governments, but by the hard physical reality of energy and precious metals. And China is not acting alone in this endeavor. We must look at the recent actions of India to fully comprehend the scale of the crisis facing Western physical stockpiles. India possesses a deep, ancient, and culturally ingrained affinity for precious metals. Gold and silver are not viewed merely as speculative investments. They are foundational to generational wealth preservation, deeply embedded in the cultural fabric through marriage, dowries, and agricultural savings. A single recent 30-day period, the Indian subcontinent imported an absolutely mind-bending 45 million ounces of physical silver. This is an apocalyptic volume of metal for a single nation to absorb in 1 month. When you combine the insatiable, culturally driven demand of India's massive population with the relentless, technologically driven industrial vacuum of China, you have the two most populous nations on Earth actively and aggressively siphoning the physical silver supply away from the West. The Western investor, lulled into a false sense of security by the stagnant paper price flashing on their brokerage app, is completely oblivious to the fact that the underlying asset is being quietly loaded onto cargo ships and flown across the Pacific. The West is trading digital receipts back and forth, congratulating themselves on their nominal fiat gains, while the East is securing the actual elements necessary to power the future of human civilization. This brings us to the concept of the terminal divergence, the exact moment when the paper market completely loses control of the physical reality. For decades, the bullion banks have successfully managed the price of silver by shorting the futures market. Whenever the physical demand threatened to drive the price higher, they would dump millions of ounces of synthetic paper silver onto the COMEX, artificially satisfying the demand and crushing the price. This mechanism works perfectly, provided that the buyers are willing to accept cash settlements and do not ask for delivery of the physical metal. But the $10 premium in Shanghai proves that this era is over. The buyers in the East do not want cash, they want the atoms. They are standing for delivery. As more and more metal flows east to capture this arbitrage profit, the physical buffer in the West shrinks to critically low levels. We are approaching the event horizon, a point of no return where the discrepancy between the paper claims and the physical inventory becomes mathematically impossible to reconcile. When the market collectively realizes that there are 100 claims for every 1 ounce of metal, a historic bank run will commence. The industrial users, the hedge funds, and the retail investors will all simultaneously demand physical delivery. The bullion banks, unable to source the metal, will be caught in a massive short squeeze. They will be forced to buy back their paper shorts at any price, driving the market into a vertical ascent. The spot price of silver will disconnect from the historical charts, unmoored from the manipulation of the past, and will seek its true equilibrium based on the desperate bids of industries fighting for survival. The strategy deployed by China is brilliant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. They are using the West's own financial instruments against it. By allowing Wall Street to suppress the paper price of silver, China has been handed a historic opportunity to acquire the most critical technological metal of the 21st century at a massive discount. They are paying a $10 premium in Shanghai because they know that $10 is a negligible fee compared to the true value of the asset they are securing. They are looking at the geological limitations of mining, the explosive growth of green energy and artificial intelligence, and the inevitable collapse of the fiat currency system, and they are making a highly calculated, highly rational decision to accumulate physical mass. The sold-out signs on the banking apps of the ICBC and the Agricultural Bank of China are not glitches, they are warnings. The 437 tons of silver withdrawn from the Shanghai Gold Exchange in just 60 days is not a statistical anomaly. It is a declaration of economic intent. The relentless draining of the COMEX registered vaults is not a temporary supply chain issue, it is the final countdown to a default. As we look at this vast, interconnected web of data, geology, and geopolitics, the message for the individual investor becomes incredibly clear. The time for complacency has passed. If you are relying on the traditional financial system to protect your wealth, you are placing your faith in a structure built on leverage and illusion. The paper price of silver that you see quoted in the financial press is a fiction, a relic of a dying system of financialization. The real price is being determined right now in the physical markets of the East, where buyers are willingly paying significantly more to ensure they hold the tangible asset. You must stop looking at the spot price and start looking at the inventory. When the COMEX registered category drops below the critical threshold, when the Shanghai premium continues to widen, and when the industrial delays for physical delivery stretch from weeks into months, the trap will spring shut. The massive wealth transfer from the paper pushers of the West to the physical accumulators of the East will be complete. This is the reality of the Great Silver Divergence. It is a slow-motion train wreck that has been decades in the making, and we are now entering the final chaotic chapters. The central banks and the bullion banks will do everything in their power to maintain the illusion of control, issuing statements about adequate supplies and temporary market dislocations. They will try to convince you that the paper receipts in your brokerage account are just as good as the metal itself. But you cannot build a solar panel out of a futures contract. You cannot power an artificial intelligence data center with a digital entry on a ledger, and you cannot protect your family's purchasing power with a fiat currency that is being systematically devalued by its own issuer. The physical world is reasserting its dominance over the financial world. The East has recognized this paradigm shift and is acting with ruthless efficiency. They are paying $10 more for your silver today because they know that tomorrow it will be unavailable at any price. Welcome to Capital Archives. The illusion is ending, and the era of physical consequence has begun. Do not be left holding the paper when the vault is finally opened and the world realizes it is empty. The data is absolute, the geology is unforgiving, and the clock is ticking. You have been warned.